Hello, and thanks for taking the time to watch this video in preparation for the workshop on the flipped classroom. During this video, we'll talk about the concept of the flip, take a tour of my stats class, which I have been doing as a flipped class, talk about the pedagogy, I'll show you what the agenda for the workshop will be, and then I'll show you some behind the scenes making of the videos. So to begin with, concept of the flip. What the flip means is that the traditional classroom, what happens during class and outside the class is typically the delivery of instruction during class and the practice of new concepts outside of class, also known as homework. And the delivery of instruction would of course be we teachers delivering our pearls of wisdom to our eager young students. Now in a flipped classroom, that gets reversed. So now the delivery of instruction happens outside of class. And that happens, of course, as a video, just like this one you're watching right now. I am doing this workshop on Flipped Classroom as a flipped workshop. So you're learning about the concepts of Flipped Classroom and a bunch of concerns and issues and information about flipped classrooms outside of the workshop. And during the workshop, what we'll do is practice actually creating a flipped lesson. So that's the basic idea. There's a lot more detail, of course, but that'll come out in the tour of the stats class. So what I've done, this is my website. This is Math with Larry. And I have statistics, AP stats, and in fact, of course, this video is also on my website in the PD section. So when a stats student comes in, maybe we will look at regular stats. So here is a bunch of, instead of chapters, I use belts, kind of a martial arts sort of thing. So let's go to orange belt. And we can click on that. And, it's statistics. We have measures of variation, calculating center, outliers and z-scores and all kinds of fun stuff. So I've organized this in 3 sections, right? We have our open-ended questions, which are the big, long, complicated questions that are a challenge, hopefully, to the students. You can look at those. And what I tell the students is, in order to answer these long, complicated, and sometimes investigative questions, you need to learn a bunch of stuff. And in fact, you need to learn all these things that are in the outline. So that happens in the instruction and homework. And this is kind of where the real work happens. And you can see right here are some videos, and a student clicks on the video, and hopefully it starts. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about measures of variation. Words of wisdom. So in this video, they're going to learn about measures of variation and all kinds of fun stuff. And you can see above it, I've given the homework. So they watch this video, they do this homework, and then they can move on. And here, coefficient of variation, doesn't have any homework above it. So you do that one and Chebyshev's theorem, and then you can move on. This homework probably has those 2 previous videos as part of this homework. And they move forward. And so what's interesting about teaching a flipped classroom is that I'm not up in front of the class anymore talking about standard deviation. They get it here on the video. Now, and here, let's go to the solutions, which is a little empty. This is, of course, still under construction. But I have solution sets for the homeworks so that they can check to know whether they've done it right or not. Um, all right, so that's a real quick tour of how I've organized my stats class. Now, you don't have to do this on a website. You can also, I've done this with geometry on Moodle. So here's my Moodle page. Here's geometry. And down here we have lines and angles. The first unit, I've broken it up into foundation skills and critical thinking. And here, there's a video, which is very much like that same concept. And here, the video's playing, and I'm describing how to solve this particular geometric problem. And what I've done is I've made this video, and I've uploaded it, as you can tell, to YouTube, right? And then on Moodle, right, I just have a link that goes to that particular video on YouTube, and the students can click on it and see how to solve that particular question. So now we can talk about some pedagogy. Right? So how is this panning out in terms of student learning? I find that the biggest benefit is pace. Right? What happens with pace is it becomes student controlled. It was actually kind of interesting because I wasn't able to do all of stats as flipped. The one issue about flipped classroom, a lot of upfront work. And so I only got so far, and then I had to unflip it. And one of the complaints that the students had is that I didn't have a pause or replay button, which a lot of students have said they have used. And I always argued, well, you can always ask questions in class, which is sort of like a pause, and you can ask me to explain it again, which is like a replay. But we all know that that's somewhat limited, and if students are really not understanding, they're only going to ask for a replay one or two times before the classmates make them feel stupid, or they just feel that way and they just stop asking because of the social climate, even in the best of classrooms. But here they can hit replay as much as they want, and they don't feel awkward or bad about it. And that actually seems to be one of the biggest benefits. I've also been told by students that it's been very effective for review, especially for something like a final. They actually go through and they can receive instruction multiple times. So this is kind of all the instruction side of things, right? There's also the practice side. Right? One complaint in math class that students have often had in the years that I've taught is, how can they answer all the questions if they don't understand it? And in the flipped classroom, practice is most effective if questions and confusion can be cleared up immediately, which can happen in a flipped classroom. I can't tell you how many times students have come in frustrated saying, I spent hours working on my homework because I don't understand it. We spend 2 seconds in class and they're like, oh, okay, I wish I knew that last night. Well, that's a waste of everybody's time, right? This means, they're working in class, they got a question, they ask it. The feedback is immediate and doesn't have to wait until the next day of class, which, is always the tension during class. Do you clear up questions on the homework or do you deliver instruction, right? And this, I think, really helps with that tension. It doesn't eliminate it, right? One problem is, well, if you have a classroom of people asking questions, there's only one of you, right? Can you actually answer everyone's questions effectively? I think it depends on the level of the class and the kind of students. My experience so far is that it's worked out pretty well, and the students will start actually helping each other as well, and that's also been effective. Another benefit, which again the students have told me about, is that they get to ask their question, right, that they're confused about. They get it answered, and they can move on. They don't have to listen to questions which they already understand. Again, it seems to be a more efficient use of time. I will say that as a teacher, there's something that I feel was lost, right? Because sometimes some interesting questions happen which interested students might not have asked themselves. And so there's pros and cons to that one. But in general, the students seem to like being able to ask their questions, get them asked and answered, and then being able to move on. And now on the teaching side of student learning, how does it feel to us as teachers? Well, one of the first things I felt is that I wasn't teaching. It was actually a really strange feeling. The students would come in, they'd start, watching their videos, they'd start, doing homework, and I'd be circulating, answering questions. I wasn't up delivering my pearls of wisdom to everybody. And that actually was strange and a hard adjustment, really, in the beginning. And I kind of realized that, well, in a sense, I am teaching. It's just the recorded me that's teaching. And in fact, I'm teaching more than I could ever teach before. I'm actually in two places at once. We finally have the technology to be in two places at once. I'm delivering essentially group instruction or communal instruction, and at the same time, individual instruction in the form of answering questions. So in fact, I'm doing double duty, although it doesn't feel like it. Another issue, as I mentioned before, is a lot of upfront work. There's no way to get around this one. You got to have everything set up before the students arrive. You got to have the videos done. And like I said, for my stats class, I had, a fair, couple of units planned out, all set up. After that, I had to unflip it because I just didn't have the time to get all the upfront work done in advance. That's what I'm doing during vacations. Another really interesting difference in teaching is that I have different tasks now that I have to keep track of. Right? Where before it was all about, well, what am I going to teach? How am I going to teach it? In a great sense, that's poured into the videos. Now, actually, what I can focus on is where is each student? There's actually a fair amount of record keeping that I need to stay on top of because I'm allowing my students to progress at slightly different paces. I have like a test at a certain time period. There's a deadline. But within that, they can actually go at their own pace. And so I got to keep track. It's like, is this student understanding? Is that student understanding? What are they doing? What's being difficult for individual students? I now have to actually focus on individual students instead of the whole class. Oops. And here's a downside to making a video. I misspelled that. Well, I can fix that. There we go. Where is each student? I think that's probably what I meant to say. All right, there's also the issue of design. All right, this is how I've done the flipped classroom, and this has been for juniors and seniors. I've pretty much used what I call an unstructured approach, which is to say I have a deadline, the test is going to be on this date, here's all the work that you need to get done, here's all the instructional videos that you need to learn what you need to know, go. And that works pretty well for juniors and seniors. Right? They're about to go to college. They should be able to handle that kind of unstructured design. It's not the only way you can do flipped classroom. There's lots of different ways, and you can do it in a structured way, in which you have all right, everybody watch the next video tonight, and everyone is going to do the work, the same work tomorrow during class. Right? And you keep everyone together. And, to be perfectly honest, even though I'm using unstructured, the students end up moving together anyways. Right? Oftentimes, the open-ended questions that I use, and that's also where I do projects, they're going to pair up and group up for those anyways, which means they kind of have to be in the same spot. And so it ends up, they're all together anyways, which is more convenient for me. But you could be more intentional about it and, assign this video tonight. You could have a quiz on the video. It's like, English reading. How do you know the students have, read their English, reading for the night? You could give them a little quiz or something like that, which, in fact, is going to be what I'm going to do for you guys during the workshop. So be ready for a quick, 3-question, did you watch this video quiz? It's going to be online, so if you could bring a laptop, that would be great. And so you can use this platform, this flipped idea, in any way you want. I mean, it's really flexible. It's what you want to do with it. A few specifics that I would recommend. Generally, it's thought that a 10 to 15 minute video is kind of the target. In stats, I gotta tell you, I don't have too many 10-minute videos. I tend more towards the 15 to 20-minute videos. It's just hard to break things down that small in stats. But the idea is to really break things down into really small pieces. Making a 2-hour video is not the idea of a flipped classroom. And it actually has really good curriculum implications. If you have 10 to 15-minute videos, that's your curriculum. I mean, you have narrowed down your concepts pretty well when you start making those videos, which is kind of fun, actually. Something to be a little aware of, sort of a pitfall that happens, I think. The videos are great, but students are students, right? And some will work more than others, and some will say that they are doing fine when they're not. And so you do have to kind of be careful about students slipping through the cracks. I would say that has to kind of be part of how you design your class. You just have to really keep track of where your students are. And keep doing those activities and projects. If all the students are doing is sitting watching videos and doing homework, we're probably not doing everything that we should be doing. There are great activities that help build concepts, projects that allow students to go deeper. The way I approach the videos is the videos are the basic information. Right? I want the students to do more than just understand the basic information. They need to do, the open questions, the projects, and so that really still has to be, I think, part of a flipped classroom, which means, students have to be grouped together eventually and work on the stuff that we've always done with activities and projects. So I'm hoping to keep the video in the 10 to 15 minute range, so I'm trying to wrap this up quickly. Just want to let you know what the agenda is going to be for the workshop. We'll start off with a quick 15-minute Moodle quiz. Probably shouldn't take 15 minutes, but I'm going to allow 15 minutes for it. And again, this is going to be, a 3 to 5, did you watch the video kind of quiz. And after the quiz, we'll have about 15 minutes of clarifying questions. Hopefully, some questions have come up for you that we can talk about. And then the bulk of our time, we'll spend 30 minutes with a lesson planning activity. So what I want you to do is think about what lesson in your class you could maybe work with to see if you could flip it. We will spend some time planning. What we'll do is we'll pair up and share and get some feedback from someone else in the room, and then try and finish it up. One of the goals is by the end of the workshop, maybe you have at least a good start, at least one lesson, which could be done as a flipped lesson. And what we'll do is we'll finish up another 15 minutes of some general Q&A. Hopefully this lesson planning activity has brought up some additional issues that we can talk about, which should be our 1 hour and 15-minute time together. So thanks for listening, and a quick reminder just to bring a laptop for the Moodle quiz, and that's about it. I'll see you. All right. So here we are behind the scenes. I'm actually in the middle of going over the workshop agenda, but I've paused recording. So you won't hear me in the video doing what I'm doing right now. But I want to show you what goes on. I'm using the Promethean board. It's connected to my laptop, and if you notice, this is just the desktop. If I switch here, here's my web browser with my Math with Larry that I showed you earlier, and the Moodle, and if I come back, this is all kind of behind the scenes. And at the moment, again, like I said, I've paused the recording. Well, I'll continue so that you can see how this really goes. Unpause. And after the quiz, we'll have about 15 minutes of clarifying questions. Hopefully, some questions will come up for you that we can talk about. And then the bulk of our time. Now, I just paused it again because I don't want to waste your time watching me write out a whole bunch of stuff. So I pause it. I write out what I'm about to talk about, which is our lesson planning activity. And then I can unpause it and continue. We'll spend 30 minutes with a lesson planning activity. So what I want you to do is think about what lesson in your class you could maybe work with to see if you could flip it. We will spend some time planning. What we'll do is we'll pair up and share and get some feedback from someone else in the room, and then try and finish it up. One of the goals is by the end of the workshop, maybe you have at least a good start, at least one lesson, which could be done as a flipped lesson. I pause the video recording all the time, right? Because I have to gather my thoughts. I look at my notes. Here's my note page that I've been using for this thing. All kinds of scribbles, so I kind of have to look at it again. And then I can continue. And what we'll do is we'll finish up another 15 minutes of some general Q&A. Hopefully this lesson planning activity has brought up some additional issues that we can talk about, which should be our 1 hour and 15-minute time together. And now, actually, coming close and see if you can